And now joining us for the program is Yves Engler, author and political activist, joining us out of Montreal, and Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist, joining us out of Bristol. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you both to the program. Where should we, I guess we'll go alphabetically and start there in Bristol with you, Tony. Hope you're safe and doing well this evening out there in the UK. Your thoughts on the frequency of these Yemeni attacks, Tony, the scope, how they now are targeting Israeli-linked vessels, not just to mention the port of Haifa, the port of al-Rashrash, but ships in the Red and Arabian Seas, the Gulf of Aden, the Sea of Oman, and as far as the Mediterranean, and now also in conjunction with Iraqi resistance.
Well, I mean, there is obviously pushback going on against the genocide in Gaza, and I suppose this is the best way to do it, really, is little bits in different places, because the Israelis need to get all parts of the Israeli military and their public and their press need to understand that they cannot continue this with impunity, as they seem to think, that they can just carry on killing nearly 40,000 civilians now, that they've, well, murdered in Gaza for no good reason other than, as we heard, the Prime Minister Netanyahu weekend talk again in Hebrew, not for the English-speaking world, but in Hebrew, about mowing the lawn. He said, even if we are finishing this soon, it will be a good mowing of the lawn, something along those lines. So he's again talking about this hideous racist idea that people of different ideas are going to be culled. I mean, this is something that there's even a great deal of disquiet about doing this with animals, but not for the Israeli leadership about doing this to Palestinians. And so it's important, I think, that the message gets back to the Israelis in one way or another. You've got to be very, very careful because, of course, they're nuclear armed. And as Moshe Dayan from the Six-Day War, the general from the Six-Day War, made clear, he said, Israel must be like a mad dog, too dangerous to bother. And of course, the key word there is mad. And the idea here is that the Israelis are quite up for having continuous fights with their neighbours in the knowledge that they might do something stupid. And we heard today Yair Katz, who's the boss of the Israeli Aviation Board, talking about using doomsday weapons. What he really means, of course, is nuclear weapons. And so they're actively suggesting that even small conventional attacks against Israel may be met with this mad attack, the use of nuclear weapons, because they do see those who are against them as subhuman, untermensch, stupid people, and in a similar way to Hitler actually saw the Jews, and he saw the gypsies and the communists. So, this is a dangerous situation, but there has to be some pushback against what the Israelis are doing, obviously, and it seems either an Israeli or a US ship has been hit by the Yemenis today.
Thank you, Tony. Yves, welcome to the program, and thanks for your patience. Now, Yves, I mean, isn't it wild when you think how the Yemeni armed forces, the Yemeni people, they've been the target themselves over the last 8 or 9 years of the Saudi-led coalition, almost daily airstrikes, a siege that led, you very well know, to disease and food insecurity, a carpet bombing campaign by the Saudi-led coalition, almost, like I said, almost daily for those 8 or 9 years. You would think they would be beat and beleaguered, but here they are, very active as heck when it comes to try and protect Palestinians in this campaign of genocide by Tel Aviv.
Yeah, they are, and it exposes the other countries in the region, be it Egypt, be it Jordan, and the rest, the others that have normalized with Israel. It exposes their complicity in this genocide in Gaza. So it's so very embarrassing, I think, for other governments and many people. But I agree with my my colleague from Bristol that I mean something has to give. I mean, if mass protests around the world of revulsion from populations around the world is obviously not enough to force the Israeli government to shift, then there needs to, Israel needs to face punishment, to face consequences for its violence. And so you know, Yemeni's response is really important. Now, you know, where does this go, and is the U.S. going to continue to support the genocide? And I shouldn't say just the U.S., the U.K. and actively, but also even my government, Canada, which is part of that coalition targeting Yemeni infrastructure and the like. But yeah, you know, what's the escalation going to be? I think that this is also tied to the fact that the Israelis really do seem, in the words of the Mad Dog, they seem like they are moving towards something with Hezbollah, ramping that up, as crazy as that seems. And I mean, I think they basically would be putting the whole region into you know, a full-on war. But I think that the people running the Israeli government, you know, that's what they want, or some of them at least. And yeah, it's obviously impressive that they can hit different Western targets in 4 different seas at the same time, hit a target in Israel. It's not clear how big a damage this is doing, but it's clearly a ripple, you know, causing a ripple around the world.
Thanks, Yves. I'm glad that you said, like, you ended your statement exactly with what you said, because that was going to lead me to my next question with Tony. Tony, I've seen Western diplomats and even analysts mention this, that, we're not too concerned. We're going to respond to the Yemeni retaliatory attacks in support of Gazans, but they are using crude missiles and drones that won't cause a lot of damage. But, you know, what I was reminded of, Tony, was that when the incendiary balloons that Palestinians send over into, you know, occupied territory, sometimes that irks the heck out of the security apparatus there in Tel Aviv. And if that's enough to get a rise out of occupation forces, imagine when the Israeli public is constantly hearing about being targeted by, no matter how crude they are, missiles and drones all the way from Yemen or from Iraq. You can really argue that they are having an impact, whether it be psychological or whatnot. They are having an impact, are they not, Tony?
Well, the only trouble is that impact just seems to fuel the crazy, the mad people and the hawks in Israel, particularly the Israeli press. Now, from a very, very young age, Israelis are brought up to believe that God has given them that land. I mean, we've seen recently people like Naomi Wolf over in Los Angeles pointing out the Bible doesn't actually say that. It says that the Bible gives the land to people who are just, you know, and they can have it if they're just. If they're not just, they can't have it, I'm afraid. So this is not taught to the children in Israel, and so they've been brought up, really brainwashed with this idea that everyone is out to get their land and that they can have all the land in that area because God said so. Well, this is really very deep brainwashing that the young people have had, and of course it's leading to what seems to be an almost inevitable, and I hate to say this, but an inevitable wider conflict in the Middle East. And isn't it interesting today that chap Yair Katz I was mentioning earlier, he's also said today, and it made it absolutely clear, the United States, the UK and Germany, their satellites are spying for us, for the Israelis, and so they're giving us constant intelligence information about what the surrounding countries, such as the Lebanese, such as the Syrians, such as the Iranians, and nearby countries are up to. And so this is complicity. And so when these generals or diplomats from the West make comments, we have to remember that they're sneaky liars, because they're not confessing to the world that they are materially part of this genocide and potentially much wider war. And in the meantime, we've got at the same time going on up in the Ukraine. I mean, maybe these two are connected, in fact, because we've had an alert level increase today by, in fact, I think it was yesterday, by the United States at their military bases right across Europe. They've gone up a level to Charlie level, which is one below the maximum on alert. So they've been provoking the Russians. So it seems like we're sleepwalking into World War III here. So provoking the Russians by attacking their command centres. This is NATO again, using their satellites and their intelligence to do this. Their ballistic missile defence systems, the Russians' ones, and even their nuclear bomber bases in Russia being attacked now by so-called Ukrainians, but actually the Russians know it's NATO doing the targeting. And so, yeah, we have to be, I think, very much aware that NATO is the problem here, really, and that the Israelis wouldn't really be able to do anything in Gaza if they weren't backed by these sneaky politicians and sneaky military people who never, ever really confess the extent to which they're aiding this genocide.
Thank you, Tony. And Yves, final thoughts with you. How come it seems that so many in the region are just sitting back with front row seats to this campaign of genocide, while only a handful, like Iraqi Resistance, like the Yemenis, like Hezbollah, are doing anything about addressing it?
Well, they've clearly been cowed by Washington and Tel Aviv. The U.S. has worked to divide up the region and make it heavily compliant to its dictates. And the U.S., of course, has military bases all over, and that is part of the backdrop, and these different very undemocratic, unresponsive to their populations, governments in their complicity with Israel's horrors. So it's been a decade-long project of Washington to dominate the region, and since the demise of the Soviet Union, they have the first invasion of Iraq and subsequent proxy wars and the like in Syria, U.S. troops. So it's I think part of that. It's going to go down as a serious embarrassment, I think, to much of the Arab world, the governments at least, in terms of their complicity. But I think it is also there is a moment. I think we're in a downward cycle, but U.S. power post Cold War was sort of at its apex, and it is declining. But I think the level of weakness and compliance in the face of Israel's crimes that we're seeing in most Arab governments is reflective of that, the height of U.S. power in the region.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both, and have a good night to both of you, and thank you for joining us on the program. Yves Engler joining us out of Montreal, and Tony Gosling there joining us from Bristol. And viewers,